The silence after I said I love you too should have been comforting. Instead, it marked the moment my world shattered, like glass hitting concrete. I still had the phone pressed to my ear, waiting for the usual click of disconnection, when my husband's voice came through again, but this time, he wasn't talking to me. She bought it completely, Blake said, his tone laced with satisfaction. The same tone I once mistook for happiness in our marriage. The grieving widow act will be perfect when the time comes. My blood ran cold. The phone shook in my hand as another voice entered the conversation. A voice that dropped my stomach like a stone. The insurance policy is airtight, my stepbrother Cameron said, his words cutting sharper than knives. 2 million plus the inherited properties. Once we trigger the clause about her instability, everything transfers clean. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, my heart pounding so loudly I feared they could hear it. The kitchen around me, our kitchen, with its cheerful yellow walls and the anniversary mug Blake had given me, suddenly felt staged, artificial. The medication switch was genius, Blake continued, his voice smug. Dr. Whitmore thinks he's treating her depression, but those pills will make her paranoid, unstable. A few more weeks, and we'll have all the documentation we need. My knees buckled, and I slid against the counter, the granite cold against my back as the phone slipped from my hand. Still, their voices carried through, the device now a window into my own betrayal. What about Alina? Cameron asked. She's been asking about the trust fund. My sister won't be an issue, Blake replied casually. She's too wrapped up in her own life to dig deeper. And once Violet's committed, Alina will thank us for handling things. Committed, the word struck me like a physical blow. They weren't just stealing from me, they were planning to have me declared unfit, locked away. My eyes landed on the pill bottle on the counter. The prescription Dr. Whitmore had given me only 3 weeks ago. The one Blake made sure I took each morning with water and breakfast. The pills that left me foggy, distant, like life was happening behind glass. How long had this been happening? How long had my husband poisoned me with kindness? How long had my stepbrother, the boy I once helped raise after Dad remarried, been plotting to take everything our father left behind? Their words blurred, muffled as if underwater, but fragments pierced through. Power of attorney. She'll never see it coming. Each phrase another nail sealing the coffin of the life I thought I had. Before we continue, let us know in the comments which country you're watching from. We love hearing from our global family. And if this is your first time here, don't forget to subscribe. Your support helps us share more true life revenge stories. My name is Violet Ashford. Until 3 minutes ago, I believed I was a grieving daughter, struggling with depression, supported by a devoted husband and family. But now I knew I was prey, and the hunters had been circling me for months. I forced myself to think. The call was still connected. They had no idea I was listening. For the first time in weeks, my mind felt sharp, clear, probably because I'd skipped my morning pill in the rush to make it to therapy. Another piece slid into place. Dr. Whitmore, quick to medicate and eager to record every episode. How much was Blake paying him? Or was Cameron behind it? With trembling hands, I ended the call. The silence afterward was louder than their voices. I sat in the same kitchen where Blake poured me coffee each morning, where Cameron joined us for Sunday dinners, where I thought I was siphoned. I began to plan. They believed they were hunting something weak. They didn't know they had awakened something far more dangerous. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I faked taking my medication. Blake watched me swallow with his usual concerned smile, the same one he wore at Dad's funeral when he promised to protect me. "How are you feeling today, sweetheart?" he asked, brushing a strand of hair from my face. His touch, once familiar, now felt ice cold. "Better." "Yes," I lied smoothly. "The fog is lifting." His smile tightened, almost too subtly to notice. "That's good. But remember what Dr. Whitmore said, recovery isn't a straight line. Bad days can still come." Unknowingly, he was setting the stage for my supposed downfall. How thoughtful of him. "I know," I replied quietly. "I'm just grateful you're handling everything. I don't know what I'd do without you." The words felt hollow, but Blake's face softened. He kissed my forehead, and I forced myself not to pull away. "Always take care of you, Violet, always." After he left for work, I slipped the pill into my palm and flushed it down the toilet. Then I called in sick to my job at the art gallery, though Blake had been pushing me to quit, insisting the stress was too much for me. But I had other plans. My first stop was the bank. Since my father's death, Blake had managed our finances, while I was too medicated and overwhelmed to focus. Still, I had access to my accounts, and I needed to see what was happening to my inheritance. The numbers on the screen made me feel sick. Transfers, withdrawals, investment changes, all under my electronic signature, though I had never approved them. Blake had been quietly moving my money. It started small, then grew as my depression deepened and I pulled away from decisions. Is everything all right? You look pale. It was Mrs. Benjamin, the bank manager, who had known my family for years. She had even helped my father set up my trust fund when I turned to Mrs. Benjamin. I need to ask you something and I need the truth. Has my husband been here, making changes to my accounts? Her expression shifted. Mrs. Ashford, let's talk in my office. The private office felt like a confessional. Mrs. Benjamin closed the door, folded her hands on the desk, and studied me with conflicted eyes. Your husband has power of attorney, she said cautiously. The paperwork was filed 6 weeks ago, after difficulties. What difficulties? The incident here at the bank. You don't remember? My stomach dropped. What incident? Her face filled with sympathy. You came in very upset, crying about people following you, insisting someone was trying to steal your money. You seemed confused. Your husband came to collect you, and the next week he returned with documents granting him power of attorney, signed by you and witnessed by Dr. Whitmore. The room spun. I gripped the chair, fighting the nausea. They had drugged me, brought me here vulnerable, and used my breakdown as proof to seize my finances. Mrs. Benjamin, I whispered, freeze all my accounts, right now. I can't do that without your husband's approval. I leaned forward, desperate. That power of attorney was obtained under false pretenses. I was under the influence of medication. She studied me, weighing my words against what she'd seen weeks ago. Finally, she reached for her phone. I'm calling Dr. Whitmore, she said. If this is another episode, no. I shot up, my chair rolling back. Please don't. He's part of this. But she was already dialing. I listened helplessly as she described my paranoia and erratic behavior. When she hung up, her face had hardened. Dr. Whitmore is on his way. I've also called your husband. They're very worried about you. I was trapped. If I stayed, I'd be committed within hours. If I ran, it would only prove their claim that I was unstable, but I couldn't let them win, not when I was close to uncovering everything. I need to use the restroom, I said. Mrs. Benjamin hesitated, then nodded. Of course, but Violet, please don't do anything drastic. Your family loves you. They just want to help. I gave her the same trusting smile I'd been giving Blake for months. I know. I'll be right back. Inside the restroom, I found a window that opened onto the alley behind the bank. It was a tight squeeze, and my dress tore as I climbed through. But I made it out just as I heard Blake's voice in the lobby. Using that polished, concerned husband tone. I had maybe an hour before they realized I was gone. I needed help, and it had to come from someone they wouldn't expect. I needed Alina. My sister-in-law lived 20 minutes away, in a suburb of perfect lawns and quiet streets. Alina was practical, skeptical, and never quick to accept easy answers. If anyone would listen, it was her. When she opened the door and saw me disheveled, her face immediately shifted to worry. Violet, what happened? Blake called, he said. You had an episode at the bank. He had already called. My stomach dropped. It was obvious they were covering every angle. Come inside, Alina said, guiding me into her spotless living room. You look awful. When was the last time you ate? I couldn't remember. The medication had taken away my appetite for weeks. Alina, I need you to really hear me, I said firmly. Blake and Cameron are trying to have me committed so they can take my inheritance. She sat across from me, her face composed. That's a very serious claim. I heard them, I insisted. Blake forgot to hang up after our call yesterday. I listened to everything. They've been drugging me, Alina. The pills Dr. Whitmore prescribed aren't antidepressants. They're making me paranoid and disoriented so they can declare me unfit. Alina was silent, studying me carefully. You realize how that sounds like the delusions of someone unwell. I know that's exactly what they want people to believe. I leaned forward, clutching her hands. But you know me. 8 years, Alina. Have I ever lied to you? Have I ever been anything but rational? She squeezed my hands gently. No, but grief changes people, Violet. And depression, I'm not depressed. The words came out louder than I meant. Yes, I was devastated about Dad. Anyone would be. But I wasn't suicidal or unstable, not the way Blake has been telling everyone. The only time I felt off was when I took those pills. Elena's phone buzzed. Blake's name lit up the screen. Don't answer, I begged. Please just give me 5 minutes to prove this. After a pause, she declined the call. 5 minutes. I showed her my banking app withdrawals and transfers I hadn't authorized. Then, I pulled out the pill bottle, explaining how insistent Blake had been about my dosage schedule. This could all be explained, Elena said, though her tone wavered. Maybe Blake was just managing your finances while you were grieving. Maybe the medication was meant to help. Then explain this. I hit play on a recording I'd made of yesterday's call. The moment I realized Blake hadn't hung up, I started recording. Elena's face went pale as Blake's voice filled the room, discussing my supposed instability and the insurance payout. Then Cameron chimed in, talking about clauses and asset transfers. Elena looked sick. Oh my God, she whispered. Violet, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. You believe me now? How could I not? That's Blake's voice. She stood, pacing to the window. This is criminal. We need to call the police. With what evidence? A recording they'll claim is fake. My word against a respected doctor and my grieving husband. By the time police sort it out, I'll be institutionalized and they'll have emptied every account. Her phone buzzed again, this time Cameron. They're both calling you, I pointed out. They're coordinating. She declined again, deep in thought. What do you want to do? I want to stop them. But I need help and I need it from someone they trust. Elena looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. What do you need? The plan was straightforward in theory, but risky in practice. Elena would call Blake, tell him I was in her living room mid-breakdown, and push for immediate psychiatric care. She'd suggest bringing me to Dr. Whitmore's office, where Blake could sign the papers. Meanwhile, I'd use the time to gather proof. This is dangerous, Elena warned as she helped me into the back of her SUV. They won't catch me, I said, though my pulse raced. Blake thinks I'm too unstable to think clearly. He won't expect me to investigate. She drove me to Blake's office building and dropped me at the parking garage. I had maybe 2 hours before the staged appointment with Dr. Whitmore. 2 hours to find solid evidence. Blake's law firm occupied 3 floors of a downtown tower. I'd been there countless times for parties and client dinners, so the security guard recognized me instantly. Mrs. Ashford, how are you feeling? Blake said you'd been unwell. Much better, thank you, Jerry. I just need to grab something from Blake's office. His secretary was at lunch. The office door unlocked. I slipped inside and went straight to his computer. Blake had always been careless with passwords, sticking to the same combination, our anniversary date, and his mother's maiden name. What I found in his files made my hands shake with rage. There were emails stretching back 6 months, conversations with Cameron about the Violet situation. They had been planning this long before my father's funeral, waiting for the right opportunity. I found messages with Dr. Whitmore about medication regimens, dosage adjustments, and potential side effects. There were forged documents with my signature, insurance forms I had never seen, and even a detailed schedule of my supposed mental decline. But the most disturbing discovery was a folder marked contingency plans. Inside were photos of me taken, secretly images of me disheveled and unfocused, clearly from my worst medicated days. There were fabricated witness statements from people I'd never met, describing erratic behavior they claimed to have seen. One document was a staged accident note, designed to look like it was written in my handwriting. This wasn't just theft, it was a full plan to erase me, to destroy my credibility so completely that no one would ever believe the truth. Hands shaking, I copied everything to a flash drive. That's when I uncovered something that froze my blood. A life insurance policy I had never signed, naming Blake as the sole beneficiary. The payout, $5 million. Their plan wasn't to keep me locked away forever. It was to establish a record of mental instability, then end my life. My phone buzzed. Alona's texts. They're getting suspicious. Wrap up now. I pocketed the drive, ready to leave, when I heard voices in the hallway. Blake and Cameron. They were back earlier than expected. I searched frantically for a hiding place, but Blake's office was too exposed. With no choice, I slid under his desk, pulling in the chair just as the door opened. She's getting too suspicious, Cameron said. That stunt at the bank almost ruined everything. Relax, Blake replied, settling into the chair, right above me. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear. Elena has her She's probably sedated and on her way to Whitmore's facility already. What if she has proof? Cameron asked. Blake laughed, a sound that cut straight through me. Proof of what? The delusions of an unstable woman. Even if she did, who would believe her? We have medical records, witnesses, even her family backing us. Once she's committed, nothing she says will matter. Whitmore will keep her medicated until she doesn't even remember her own name, let alone some fantasy about her husband conspiring against her. And the final step? Cameron pressed. 6 months, Blake answered. Maybe less, if we push it. A tragic incident in the facility, brought on by overwhelming guilt from her paranoid accusations. Sad, believable, and impossible to dispute. I bit down on my knuckles, tasting blood. They weren't just planning to silence me, they wanted it to look like I had ended my own life. The insurance payout would go to Blake. The inheritance would be his, as my widower. Cameron would take his share for orchestrating everything. What about Alina? Cameron asked. She's always been soft-hearted, Blake replied. Once Violet's gone, she'll see it as us sparing her more suffering. She might even thank us for handling it. My phone vibrated again against my leg. I didn't dare look, but I knew it was Alina waiting. We should go, Blake finally said. Whitmore's expecting us, and I need to play the devastated husband perfectly. Chairs scraped as they moved toward the door. Then Blake paused near the desk. You know the best part. His voice was chillingly calm. She believed I loved her, right up until the end. She trusted me completely. Almost makes me feel guilty. Almost. Still $7 million buys a lot of sympathy. They left, their laughter echoing down the hall. I stayed hidden for several minutes, my legs trembling before I dared crawl out. 7 million, that was the value they placed on my life, my father's love, my marriage vows. I checked my phone. 3 urgent texts from Elena. Where are you? They're asking questions. I said you went to the bathroom, but they don't believe me. Blake is furious. Get out now. I ran. I reached the parking garage just as Elena's SUV skidded into view. I jumped inside and she sped off before I'd even closed the door. What happened? She gasped. Blake called, shouting that I was lying about you being there. I've never heard him like that. Because his mask is slipping, I said, breathless. Alana, it's worse than we thought. They weren't just planning to steal from me, they were planning to end my life. I told Alina everything I had overheard and showed her the files I'd copied. She pulled into an empty parking lot and sat frozen, her face pale as she studied the evidence. We have to go to the police now, she said. This is attempted murder. Is it though? They haven't actually tried anything yet, and from a cop's perspective, it doesn't look good. A woman with documented mental health issues, accusing her husband and stepbrother of plotting against her for money. The same woman who just broke into her husband's office and stole confidential files. Elena's phone rang. Blake's name appeared on the screen. Answer it, I told her, but put it on speaker. With trembling hands, she accepted the call. Alina, thank God. Blake's voice filled the car, dripping with concern I now recognized as false. Is Violet with you? She's having a severe episode. She broke into my office. She's been making wild accusations. I don't know where she is, Alina replied smoothly. She left my house hours ago. She seemed frightened. What if she hurts herself? That's exactly what I'm afraid of, Blake said, his tone convincing enough to fool anyone. Dr. Whitmore believes she may be having a full psychotic break. We need to find her before she does something irreversible. Have you called the police? I'm about to. Alina, if she contacts you, don't engage, just call me immediately. In her state, she may see you as part of her imagined conspiracy. After the call ended, silence filled the car. He's going to have you listed as a missing person, Alina finally said. Dangerous to yourself and others. Every officer in the city will be looking for you. Then I need to disappear. But first, the evidence has to reach someone trustworthy. If not the police, my father's lawyer, Richard Blackwood. He set up my trust fund. He knew Dad's wishes better than anyone. Elena's expression shifted. Where does he live? He doesn't. He passed away 3 months ago. Her face fell. Then who? His daughter Sophia Blackwood. She took over the practice. She's young but known for her brilliance. And more importantly, she has no connection to Blake or Cameron. I searched her profile on my phone, then gave Alina the address. We drove across town to the Blackwood Law offices, a small firm inside a restored Victorian mansion. Sophia Blackwood was nothing like I'd imagined. She looked no older than 30, with short auburn hair and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Ashford," she said, standing from behind her father's desk, "I was sorry to hear of your father's passing. He spoke of you often. Miss Blackwood, I need your help, and I need you to believe something that may sound impossible." I explained everything: the overheard call, the drugs, the financial manipulation, the forged records. Sophia listened intently, jotting occasional notes, her expression hardening with each detail. When I finished, she stayed silent for a moment before saying, "This is extensive. If even half of this is accurate, you're in real danger. You believe me. I believe the evidence. These financial statements, the forged documents, the insurance policies, this isn't delusion. It's a carefully orchestrated fraud." She leaned forward. "But even with this, pursuing a case will be very difficult. They've built a strong narrative about your mental state." "I don't want a trial," I said quietly. "I want to destroy them." Her brow lifted. "Destroy them. They've spent months dismantling my credibility, my relationships, my stability. They've stolen my money and planned my death. Prison isn't enough. I want them to lose everything just as they intended for me." Alina shifted uneasily. "Violet, maybe we should focus on stopping them, not—" "No," I cut in. Turning to her, I saw her flinch at the intensity in my eyes. "They made this personal when they decided my life was worth $7 million. When Blake kissed me goodnight while plotting my death. When Cameron forged my signature on my own ruin. This isn't just about justice anymore." I turned back to Sophia. "Can you help me, or not?" She held my gaze, then smiled, sharp, deliberate, reminiscent of her father. "Mrs. Ashford," she said, "I think we can do better than destroying them. We can make them destroy themselves." The plan she outlined was simple, yet devastating. We would use their own schemes against them, twisting their narrative until it collapsed. "The key," Sophia explained, "is making them believe they're still in control. They believe you're unstable and running scared. Let them keep thinking that while we carefully dismantle everything they've built." Phase 1 was already underway. While Blake and Cameron searched for me, Sophia was filing emergency injunctions to freeze my accounts and assets using the fraud evidence I had collected. She was also preparing criminal charges and civil lawsuits designed to keep them tied up in court for years. But that was only the start. "Your stepbrother Cameron works in real estate development, right?" Sophia asked. "Yes," I confirmed. "He has several major projects moving forward, projects dependent on investors who value honesty and trust. How do you think they'll respond if they learn he's connected to elder fraud and attempted homicide?" Alina shifted uncomfortably. "But wouldn't that destroy innocent people's investments? Cameron's projects are built on lies and stolen funds," I replied firmly. "Anyone who loses money because of his crimes is a victim of his fraud, not collateral damage." Sophia nodded. "Exactly. And as for Blake, his law firm represents high-profile clients who would be very interested to know their attorney has been forging documents and conspiring in insurance fraud." "You're talking about ending their careers," Alina said. "They were planning to end my life," I answered. "Compared to that, this is mercy." Phase 2 brought in Dr. Whitmore. Sophia had contacts on the medical board who were more than willing to review his patient files, especially the suspicious medication patterns and questionable financial ties with certain families. "But the key," Sophia reminded me, "is getting them to incriminate themselves further. Right now, we have evidence of fraud and conspiracy, but we need them to act in ways that clearly show intent to harm you." "And how do we do that?" I asked. "We give them what they want. We let them believe they've won." The plan required me to vanish completely for 72 hours, while Sophia advanced the legal process. Alina took me to her family's cabin in the mountains, a place Blake didn't know and Cameron had never visited. For 3 days, I lived off the grid. No phone, no internet, no contact with anyone. Alina brought supplies and updates, while I sat alone with my thoughts and anger, preparing for the moment I would face them again. On the 3rd day, Alina arrived with news. Her eyes shone with excitement. "It's working. Blake filed a missing person report, calling you suicidal and dangerous. Cameron's been pulling strings to pressure the police into finding you, and Dr. Whitmore has already drafted a psychiatric hold order." "And on the legal side?" I asked. "Sophia's moving fast," Alina said. "Complaints filed with the medical board, the bar association, and the district attorney. She's quietly reaching out to Cameron's investors and Blake's clients, asking simple questions about their dealings. Three of Cameron's biggest investors already pulled out. Blake's firm has launched an internal investigation, and Dr. Whitmore's license is now under review. Good, I said, but it's not enough. They need to confess. They need to admit their crimes in a way no one can deny. How do we force that? Alina asked. I smiled, and she stepped back. At the expression on my face, we give them exactly what they've been planning for. We stage my death. It was dangerous, extreme, and exactly what we needed. Sophia had a contact in the coroner's office, a woman who owed her family a favor and would help create a false death certificate. Alina would discover my body at the bottom of a cliff near the cabin, the apparent result of a mental breakdown and tragic accident. The body would be too damaged for quick identification, buying us crucial time. Meanwhile, I would be hidden in a safe house Sophia arranged, watching as Blake and Cameron celebrated too early and revealed the full extent of their crimes. This is insane, Alina said for the 100th time as we prepared. If something goes wrong, nothing will, I cut in, though my heart pounded. Blake and Cameron think they're too careful, too clever, but they're about to make their biggest mistake trusting each other. The staged accident unfolded exactly as planned. Alina called 911 in tears, reporting my car abandoned near the cliff and a body below. Police arrived to find the scene perfectly staged. My jacket snagged on a branch, my purse scattered across rocks, and a body that could only be identified through dental records from Sophia's safe house. I watched the news with grim satisfaction. Blake played the grieving widower, flawlessly giving interviews about my supposed struggles with mental illness and his desperate attempts to get me help. She was the love of my life, he told reporters, tears sliding down his face. Just wish I could have saved her. Cameron was quieter but no less convincing, speaking about how the family had stood by me during my struggles after my father's death. But I knew the truth would come out when they thought no one was listening. Sophia had arranged surveillance equipment in both Blake's house and Cameron's office. We didn't have to wait long. Just 2 days after my supposed death, they met at Blake's home to celebrate. I can't believe it actually worked, Cameron said, his voice carrying clearly through the hidden microphones. When she jumped, I thought someone would realize we pushed her to it. Please, Blake scoffed. Everyone knows she was unstable. The accident was bound to happen. We just helped it along. The insurance money should be in within the month. $5 million, plus the inheritance properties, split 50-50, like we agreed. Cameron continued. Actually, Blake said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his tone, I've been rethinking our deal. There was a pause. What do you mean? Cameron asked. Well, I did most of the work, the medication, the psychological manipulation, managing her day after day. You only handled the financial side. We agreed on 50-50, Blake. We agreed on many things. But Violet's gone now, and dead women don't have stepbrothers. Legally, I'm her sole heir. I leaned closer, hardly believing what I was hearing. They were already turning on each other, just as I'd expected. You ungrateful fool, Cameron snapped. This was my idea. I figured out how to access her trust fund. I found Dr. Whitmore, and I'm the one who married her. I spent 2 years pretending to love a woman I couldn't stand. Do you know how exhausting it was to act like I cared about her feelings, her art gallery, her cooking? His words hit me like blows, even though I'd prepared myself. Hearing Blake describe our marriage as nothing but a scheme, hearing the contempt in his tone, it was nearly unbearable. Still, I forced myself to listen. I earned every cent of that money, Blake continued. And if you think you'll walk away with half, you're more delusional than Violet ever was. I'll expose everything, Cameron threatened. I'll tell the police about the drugs, about Dr. Whitmore, about all of it. Blake laughed. With what proof? You think I kept records? You think I left a trail? The only evidence was on my computer, and I've already destroyed it. My heart sank. If Blake had truly erased it, the copies I'd taken might be useless. Besides, Blake went on, who would believe you? You're just the grieving stepbrother trying to profit from your sister's death. I'm the devastated widower. Guess which story the jury will believe. You're a coward, Cameron hissed, his voice rising with anger. I can do whatever I want. Violet's dead. The money is mine, and you can't prove otherwise. There was a scuffle. Cameron's voice came through, strained and furious. Get your hands off me. Get out of my house, Blake said coldly. And if you ever threaten me again, I'll make sure the police know exactly who suggested spiking my mentally ill wife. This isn't over, Cameron spat. Yes, it is. Violet's dead, and so is our partnership. Don't contact me again." A door slammed. Silence followed. Then, through the feed, I watched Blake pour himself a drink and raise his glass with a cruel smile. "To Violet," he said. "Thanks for the 7 million, sweetheart." I turned off the recording, my hands shaking with anger. Sophia, sitting beside me, was already on her phone. "Did you get all that?" she asked someone on the other end. "Perfect, we'll need copies for the DA's office." She hung up and looked at me. "We have everything: confessions, proof of conspiracy, and even threats. This will put them away for decades." "Good," I replied, though my voice sounded hollow, even to myself. "When do we move?" "Tomorrow morning. The police will arrest them both at the same time. After that, we'll reveal your survival to the press. You'll be the woman who faked her death to expose her husband's plot." I should have felt victorious. I should have felt relief. Instead, all I felt was emptiness. "Violet." Elena's voice came from behind me. She had been staying at the safe house too, afraid Cameron or Blake might target her. "Are you okay?" "I heard my husband describe our marriage as a lie," I said quietly. "I heard him laugh about my death. I heard him toast my memory while planning how to spend the money." I looked at her. "How am I supposed to be okay?" Elena sat down beside me and held my hand. "You're supposed to be alive. Everything else we'll work on." The arrests came at dawn. I stood in Sophia's office, watching as news crews surrounded Blake's house and Cameron's apartment. Seeing them led away in handcuffs should have felt like justice, but instead, I felt strangely numb. Mrs. Ashford, Sophia's assistant, knocked on the door. "The press conference is in an hour. Are you ready?" I glanced at the mirror. Weeks of being drugged and the stress of recent days had left me thinner, with dark circles under my eyes. I looked like someone who had survived a battle which, in a way, I had. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied. The press conference was chaotic. Reporters shouted questions about how I'd survived, why I had faked my death, and what I had uncovered about my husband's scheme. I responded carefully, following the script Sophia and I had prepared. But when one reporter asked how I felt about my husband's betrayal, I spoke from the heart. "You want to know how it feels?" I looked straight into the camera. "It feels like realizing that the person you trusted most has been quietly destroying you for months. It feels like learning that every 'I love you' was a lie, every kiss just an act, every moment of closeness, nothing more than a calculation of how much my death was worth. It feels like dying while still being alive." The room fell silent. I continued, my voice steady. "Blake didn't just plan to kill me. He destroyed my ability to trust, my belief in love, and my faith that the people closest to me cared if I lived or died. At least if he had shot me outright, I would have died believing our marriage was real." I stood, ignoring Sophia's gesture to sit down. "But here's what Blake and Cameron didn't expect," I said firmly. "They didn't expect me to figure out their plan. They didn't expect me to have people who cared for me like my sister-in-law, Helena, and my lawyer, Sophia. And they certainly didn't expect me to be strong enough to fight back." Leaning toward the microphones, I added, "To anyone else facing something similar, if someone is making you doubt yourself, if they're pushing medication you don't need, if they're cutting you off from your support system, trust yourself. You're not paranoid, you're not delusional, and you're not alone." I walked out to loud applause, though I barely noticed it. All I could think about was going home, except I no longer had one. The house I shared with Blake was now a crime scene, and even if it wasn't, I could never live there again. The trial became a media spectacle. Blake and Cameron claimed they had been framed and that I had staged everything, but the evidence was undeniable: the recordings, the forged documents, and the testimony of Dr. Whitmore, who agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence, testified for 3 days, explaining how the pills made me feel like I was losing my mind, how I uncovered the financial fraud, and how I overheard Blake planning my death. Blake's lawyer tried to portray me as a bitter wife seeking revenge, but the recordings told the truth. When the jury heard Blake toasting my death and bragging about insurance money, several looked visibly shaken. The verdict came after just 4 hours: guilty on all counts. Blake was sentenced to 25 years for conspiracy, insurance fraud, and elder abuse. Cameron received 20 years for his role. Dr. Whitmore was sentenced to 10 years and lost his medical license for life. Justice had been served, yet I felt empty. 6 months later, I was living in a small apartment across town, struggling to build a life that didn't feel like mine. The insurance companies had paid claims on my supposed death, then sued to recover the money when I returned. My inheritance was tied up in court. The art gallery had dismissed me during my breakdown, and no one wanted to hire the woman who had faked her death even if it was to survive. Alina visited often, but I could see the concern in her eyes. I wasn't improving. If anything, I was worse. The numbness that began during the trial had grown stronger, leaving me detached from everything. You need to talk to someone, Alina urged one day. A therapist, a counselor, someone who can help you work through this. I've had enough of therapists, I replied coldly. The last one had nearly had me committed so Blake could steal my money. Not all therapists are like Dr. Whitmore, she reminded me. There are good ones who truly want to help. I knew she was right, but I couldn't bring myself to care. What was the point of healing when my entire life had been a lie? What was the point of moving forward when I couldn't even trust my own judgment about people? The doorbell rang, breaking my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone, and Alina was already there. Through the peephole, I saw a woman I didn't recognize, middle-aged, professionally dressed, with kind eyes and a calm expression. Mrs. Ashford, she said softly, my name is Dr. Camilla Asher. I'm a psychiatrist, but I'm not here in that role today. I came because I read about your case, and I want to discuss something important. When I opened the door, I kept the chain on. If this is about treatment, it's not, she interrupted. It's about other women. Women who've lived through the same kind of abuse you faced. That made me pause. I unlatched the chain and let her in. Dr. Asher sat down in my living room and opened a folder. I've spent 15 years working with victims of psychological abuse, she explained. What happened to you? The drugging, gaslighting, financial control, that's more common than people realize. She showed me photographs, documents, clippings. All of these are just from the past year, she said. Women declared incompetent by husbands or relatives. Women manipulated into believing they were unstable. Most didn't realize until it was too late. I stared at the faces, different ages, different backgrounds, but all with the same hollow expression I saw in my own mirror each morning. What happened to them? I asked. Some are confined to psychiatric facilities, medicated into silence. Some lost everything and now live in poverty. A few, she hesitated. A few didn't survive. Her words hit me like a blow. You're saying there are more Blakes, more Camerons. I'm saying there's an entire network of people who exploit vulnerable women, especially those with assets. They use the mental health system as a weapon, drawing in doctors, lawyers, even family members as accomplices. Alina leaned forward. So what can we do? Dr. Asher smiled for the first time. That's why I'm here. You have something the others didn't. Proof. You have evidence. And you have a story people believe. It gives you the power to expose this system and protect others from what happened to you. I stayed quiet, staring again at those photos, at the haunted eyes. What would I need to do? Tell your story. Not just the parts that made headlines, but the subtle pieces, the small signs, the slow erosion of independence, the way that made you question your own sanity. Share that, so other women recognize the warnings before it's too late. And you think that will make a difference? I think it could save lives. The foundation began simply just me, Dr. Asher, and Elena working out of a small rented office. We named it the Violet Ashford Foundation for Psychological Abuse Awareness. Our mission was clear: educate women on the warning signs of manipulation, and offer resources to anyone who suspected they were being targeted. The first few months were difficult. I had to relive my experience again and again at support groups, women's organizations, interviews with journalists. Each retelling felt like reopening an old wound. But something unexpected started happening. Women began reaching out. They saw their lives in my story. They recognized patterns they had been told to ignore. There was Margaret, whose son secretly increased her medication while transferring her assets to his name. Lisa, whose husband convinced her she had early dementia so he could seize control of her business. Jennifer, whose stepfather forged her signature on legal papers while her mother turned away. Each story was unique, but the pattern repeated: isolation, manipulation, gaslighting, and financial control. In nearly every case, friends and family dismissed their concerns, insisting their loved ones would never harm them. Margaret said it best during one support meeting: the hardest part wasn't losing the money, It was realizing my own son saw me as nothing more than a walking bank account. I understood exactly what she meant as the foundation grew. We built resources, checklists of warning signs, legal guides to safeguard assets, networks of doctors and lawyers who recognized psychological abuse. We launched a hotline staffed by survivors who could listen and believe. Above all, we created a space where women were taken seriously even before they had proof. 5 years after Blake's conviction, I stood before a congressional committee, testifying on the urgent need for federal laws against psychological abuse and financial exploitation of vulnerable adults. The current system, I told them, treats these crimes as family disputes or civil matters. But what happened to me and to hundreds of other women is not a private dispute. They are highly organized criminal operations, responsible for destroying lives and stealing billions each year. I looked across the committee. Some members were taking notes, others distracted on their phones, but a few were really listening, and that was enough. These criminals depend on silence, I continued. They exploit the shame and of their victims. They take advantage of a system that often dismisses women when they speak up. But we're no longer silent, we're no longer ashamed, and we are not backing down. 6 months later, the legislation passed. The Violet Ashford Act established federal penalties for psychological abuse tied to financial exploitation, secured funding for victim services, and required specialized training for law enforcement and medical staff. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated not only for myself but for all the women who had been ignored, silenced, or told they were unstable. Instead, what I felt was something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Then came the call one Friday morning in spring. I was in my office at the foundation reviewing a case file when my assistant knocked. "Mrs. Ashford, someone's here to see you. She says it's personal." A young woman stepped in, dark hair, nervous eyes. She seemed familiar, though I couldn't place her. "Sorry to interrupt," she said softly. "I'm Rachel Whitmore, Dr. Whitmore's daughter." The file slipped from my hands. Dr. Whitmore, the psychiatrist who had conspired with Blake to have me committed, released from prison just 6 months ago. Rachel hurried to continue, reading my expression. "I know you have no reason to trust me, but I need to tell you about my father, about what he's doing now." I motioned for her to sit, my heart already pounding. "What do you mean?" "He's doing it again," she said. "The same scheme he used on you. He's found new victims, new partners. This time, he's being more cautious." She placed a folder on my desk. "I've been tracking him since his release. I hoped prison would change him, but instead, it only made him more calculated. He's covering his tracks better." I opened the folder, and my blood ran cold. Photographs of elderly women, medical records, financial documents, the same patterns I remembered: drugging, isolation, manipulation. "How many?" I asked quietly. "At least 6 confirmed," Rachel replied. "Possibly more. He's part of a larger network, other doctors, lawyers, administrators at care facilities. They target wealthy widows with no close family to intervene." I studied the photographs. In their faces, I saw my own story: confusion, fear, the slow erosion of independence. "Why tell me this? Why not go to the police?" Her face tightened. "I tried, but he's learned. Everything looks legitimate. The prescriptions are valid. The financial documents flawless. To outsiders, it all seems proper. Without an insider or real proof, the police think I'm just a bitter daughter." She leaned closer. "But you stopped him once. If anyone can stop him again, it's you." I stared at the files, feeling the weight settle in. For 5 years, I had built a stable life. The foundation was thriving. I'd found peace. I was even dating again, a kind man named Maverick, who knew my past and loved me anyway. I could walk away. But the photographs pulled me back, the faces of women enduring what I had barely survived, women who might not escape as I had. "What do you need from me?" I asked. The investigation lasted 8 months. With Rachel as our inside source, we uncovered the full scope of Dr. Whitmore's operation. It was far more elaborate than anything Blake and Cameron had attempted: a multi-state network of dozens of conspirators and hundreds of victims. The hardest part was watching it unfold in real time, knowing women were being exploited while we gathered proof. But we had to be patient, building a case too strong to dismiss or bargain away. "Mrs. Henderson is getting worse," Rachel reported during one of our weekly meetings. "They've raised her medication again. Her daughter is pressing for power of attorney." Mrs. Henderson, a 75-year-old widow with a large estate, had become a target after her daughter connected with Dr. Whitmore. "How long do we have?" I asked. "Maybe a week," Rachel said. "Once they get power of attorney, they'll act quickly. They've learned from your case. They won't drag it out this time." I made a choice that once would have terrified me, the woman I used to be, who trusted to Isley and questioned nothing. We decided to move early, even without all the evidence in place. What we had was enough to save Mrs. Henderson, and sometimes that has to be enough. The raid took place at dawn. Federal agents, directed by the FBI's white-collar crime unit, struck 12 locations at once: Dr. Whitmore's office, the care facilities, the lawyers' firms, and the homes of everyone involved. I was present when they arrested Dr. Whitmore. He looked older, weaker than I remembered, but his eyes still carried the same cold calculation that had haunted me years ago. "Mrs. Ashford," he said as the agents led him away in handcuffs, "I should have known you'd be behind this. You should have stayed in prison," I answered, "or at least chosen another profession." He gave a smile that made my skin crawl. "You think you've won? You think this changes anything? There are countless operations like this one. Hundreds of doctors and lawyers know how profitable vulnerable women can be. You can't stop them all." "Maybe not," I replied, "but I can stop you. And that's enough for today." The trial that followed was larger than Blake and Cameron's had ever been. The media labeled it the Whitmore conspiracy, uncovering corruption that reached into some of the nation's most trusted institutions. Dr. Whitmore was sentenced to life in prison, while his partners received terms ranging from 10 to 30 years. The facilities were shut down, the lawyers disbarred, and the surviving victims began the long process of reclaiming their lives and assets. But the real impact wasn't just the convictions, it was the conversation that followed. Suddenly, people were talking about psychological abuse, the vulnerability of elderly women, and the systems that had failed them. Medical schools began teaching how to recognize abuse. Law enforcement created new protocols to investigate these crimes, and most importantly, women started speaking up. The Foundation's hotline was overwhelmed with calls from women who saw the warning signs in their own lives and chose to trust their instincts. Dozens of cases were stopped before reaching the point mine had, giving women a chance to escape before they lost everything. "You've changed the world," Maverick told me one evening, as we sat on the porch of the home we had bought together. Modest place, with a garden where I finally grew the flowers I had longed for but never had time for during my marriage to Blake. "I've changed a small part of it," I corrected. "There's still so much left to do. There always will be." He wrapped his arm around me, steady and warm. Maverick was nothing like Blakeness, where Blake had been deceitful, supportive where Blake had been manipulative, genuine where Blake had been calculating. It had taken years to believe in love again, to trust that someone could care without trying to destroy me. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, choosing to fight instead of just walking away. I thought for a moment, watching the sunset spill gold and pink across the sky. "No," I said. "Blake and Cameron stole 2 years of my life, but they also gave me something. They gave me purpose. They showed me I was stronger than I ever knew. And Whitmore reminded me the fight isn't over. There will always be predators, but there will always be people willing to stand against them." 10 years after the phone call that changed everything, I found myself testifying before another congressional committee, this time about the success of the Violet Ashford Act and the need to expand protections. When I first told my story, I began looking at the lawmakers before me. I was just one woman trying to expose the men who tried to destroy her. I never imagined it would grow into a movement. The results were undeniable. Since the act passed, prosecutions for psychological abuse had risen by 400%. The Foundation had helped more than 10,000 women escape abusive situations. Our hotline had received over 50,000 calls. But the numbers that mattered most to me were smaller, more personal. 6 women avoided being drugged by family members. 12 elderly women were rescued from fraudulent care homes. 37 women successfully fought off attempts to have them declared incompetent. Each one represented a victory. Each one was a life saved. "The predators are still out there," I continued. "They adapt, finding new ways to exploit vulnerable women. But we adapt too. We're listening when women say something is wrong. We're believing them when they report abuse. And we're fighting back." I paused, thinking about all the women who had shared their stories with me, all the survivors who had found the courage to speak up 10 years ago. I was someone who trusted blindly and questioned nothing. I believed the people who claimed to love me would never hurt me. I was wrong, and it almost cost me everything. But I learned something important. Being wrong about people doesn't make you weak or naive. It makes you human. Being human means you deserve dignity and respect, not to be manipulated or exploited. I paused, feeling the weight of everything I had endured, everything I had learned, and everything I had rebuilt from the ruins of my broken marriage. To any woman watching this who feels something isn't right, who has been told she's paranoid, imagining things, or overreacting, trust yourself. Your instincts are valid, your concerns are real, and you are not alone. I thought about the foundation, the network of survivors and advocates we had built, and the women finding strength in their voices. We are here, we are listening, and we're not going anywhere. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, 15 years after Blake's conviction. I was in my office at the Foundation's new downtown headquarters, a place that housed not just our organization, but a dozen others working to protect vulnerable adults. The return address made my hands tremble. Blake Morrison, Federal Correctional Institution, Coleman, Florida. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. Over the years, Blake had tried to reach me, letters I discarded unread, calls I refused. But something about this one felt different. Inside was a single sheet of paper in his familiar handwriting. Violet, I know you may never read this, and I don't blame you. I have no right to contact you, but I'm dying, and there are things I need to say. I have pancreatic cancer. The doctors give me 7 months. I've spent 15 years in prison thinking about what I did to you, and I know now how wrong I was. I can't undo the past. I can't return the trust I destroyed or the years I stole. I can't bring back the woman I broke. But I can finally tell you the truth. I never loved you. I married you for money. I stayed with you for money. I planned to kill you for money. Every kiss was a lie. Every I love you a performance. Our marriage was nothing but calculation. But what I didn't see then was that you were worth far more than money. You were kind, trusting, and generous. Instead of honoring those qualities, I exploited them. You deserved a husband who would protect you, not destroy you. I've followed the news. I've seen what you've built, the women you've helped, the lives you've saved. You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and made it into something meaningful. You turned my betrayal into a shield for others. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know I respect what you've become. You're stronger, braver, and better than I ever was. I'm sorry for every lie, every manipulation, every wound I caused. I'm sorry I wasn't the man you thought you married or the man you deserved. I hope you found love, happiness, and peace. Blake, I read the letter twice, then set it down and looked out my office window at the city below. Somewhere, women were living their lives, trusting their partners, believing in love. Some would face betrayal, as I once had, but many would be protected because of the work we'd done, the conversations we'd started, and the systems we'd improved. I thought about the woman I had been 15 years ago. Trusting, naive, vulnerable. That woman was gone, destroyed by Blake's betrayal, but from her ashes rose someone stronger, someone ready to protect others from those who prey on the vulnerable. I picked up my phone and called Maverick. "How was your day?" he asked, his voice carrying the warmth I had come to recognize and trust. "Complicated," I admitted, "but good. How about yours?" "Better now that I'm talking to you." I smiled, feeling the comfort of being loved by someone who saw me as more than money, more than a target, more than a means to an end. "I love you," I said, and I meant it fully. "I love you, too," he replied, and I knew he meant it. After we hung up, I slid Blake's letter into the shredder and turned back to my work. Tomorrow, I would deliver a speech at a global conference of advocates, survivors, and law enforcement officials, people united in protecting vulnerable adults from exploitation. The title of my presentation, From Victim to Victor, How Betrayal Can Become Purpose. I had a story to share, women to protect, and a world to change. Blake was dying in prison, alone and forgotten. I was living in freedom, surrounded by love and purpose. Asterisk.